From Acapulco, Mexico, this is Anarchast.
Hey everybody, welcome to another edition of Anarchast, your home for anarchy on the internet. And I was at Acapulco this year and ran into so many amazing people. And one of them was Danny Shine, who I've met a few times. And he's done some great work on YouTube. He continues to do it under the name Social Experimentalist. A lot of sort of man on the street type stuff, talking to people, speaker's corner type stuff, trying to sort of shake things up on the street, mostly in London, there where he lives. And I ran into him at Acapulco. We got talking and I said, yeah, we should really have you on Anarchast and talk about some of the stuff you're doing in case some people on our audience weren't aware of it, because it really is great stuff. And we'll try to show in a few clips during this episode of Anarchast to show you what Danny's doing. So Danny, it's great to see you. I'm sorry to hear you had to head back to London. You had to leave beautiful Acapulco here for now, but great to talk to you. And before we get started, though, I want to ask you, how did you become an anarchist?
Before I answer that question, I just want to thank you for the most amazing time we had. I brought my family with, and it was just like ideal paradise, the best place in the world, and with people that I've just felt so incredibly comfortable with, everyone there. So thank you so much, and I'm really looking forward to next year. It's funny you asked me that. I've always felt uncomfortable with labels. So I don't really call myself anything, but I've learned over the years, because of what I do. I mean, I come from a very kind of traditional background. The idea of anarchism, I didn't even know what an anarchist was till I was, I suppose, about 40, which was 10 years ago. But because what I've been doing, which is disrupting on the streets of London, using signs and mainly megaphones.
Independent thoughts lead to chaos. Thinking is boring. Thinking is hard work, and it's not worth the energy. If you see a Buddhist on the street, try and get them to leave their religion. Buddhists are trying to get us to meditate. Meditation is a waste of good shopping time. Does anyone else notice how Canary Wharf security uniforms look suspiciously like public servant police uniforms? Yet they are private employees of a private area, yet they are allowed to wear a uniform which looks exactly like a police uniform. Ladies and gentlemen, the true thing is, I know we're creating a scene, but creating a scene is not illegal. You were born free, you will live free, you will die free. You are allowed to make a scene, you're allowed to scream for joy, you're allowed to complain, you're allowed to cry, you're allowed to love people, you're allowed to hug people. And we're starting to live in a world where we're starting to feel scared. We're starting to forget just how divine and special we are as human beings.
So I'll go into a public space and I'll start speaking about all sorts of unusual ideas. Because I did that, I've attracted, all the authoritarians, and it was through that experience, through the experience of being dragged through the courts several times into some of the most ridiculous cases, and going to court and watching what goes on in court, starting my own political party off as a kind of social experiment. It was through all those experiences that I started to become aware that the stuff we've been told is just a complete pile of rubbish, and that the government are not what I thought they were. Because I went to government indoctrination camp, as I call it now, otherwise known as school. And so I would say that I kind of became aware of this way of thinking over the years with the help of various people. One of the people, for example, that really helped crystallize my understanding was Larkin Rose and his book, The Most Dangerous Superstition. I love the way he describes it and turns it all on its face. And it's also what I like about your attitude is that you just get up there and say it as it is, which is that basically what the mind controllers, which is what the word government means, what the mind controllers are a bunch of either completely unconscious or semi-conscious or fully conscious bandits that are our enemy, and that like all really good enemies and good criminals, are brilliant at pointing towards everybody else and everything else, so to make sure that we don't sniff what they're up to. And I learned all that through that experience, and through then coming across people like Larkin and other such people who can crystallize it and put it so beautifully in writing and say it as it is.
Yeah, absolutely. Larkin does such a great job of it. His book, The Most Dangerous Superstition, if anyone doesn't know it, you definitely have to check it out. And all the work he does, he just sort of basically puts it out there exactly how it is. And to a lot of brainwashed people, it sounds shocking because they're brainwashed. They've been told their whole life that the government's here to help you. You are part of the government. This is what democracy is. Oh, that's why a lot of people use the word we. I just corrected someone on Facebook yet again. I try not to. I try not to even get involved. I won't actually see the comments after I post. I'll just put in a little thing. A guy said, we need to stop putting people in jail for so long. And I responded, we? I'm not putting anyone in jail. And that's part of the indoctrination that they do, is making people think that this thing is us and this is part of us. And so a lot of people will use that word a lot. They'll say, well, we should change this law. It's like, well, you don't change any laws. You're not in charge of anything. They make all those laws and they actually own you. And most people just don't realize it. So one of the great things about what you do, and this is something I brought up so many times on the show, is just get out there and do something. You know, like so many people tend to just take this information and sit in their house and not really even talk about it, even with friends and family, because it can be sometimes awkward or even kind of ugly, because when you're talking to brainwashed people, they can really get angry at you and all that kind of stuff. But to get out there and get out there on the street like you do and really just do what you do and just get out there with a bullhorn and see what happens is great. So I've watched a number of your things over the years and really enjoyed it. I'm glad you're still doing it and continue to watch it. Why don't you give us a few sort of examples of things that you've done that have been kind of interesting or shocking from your perspective, both from the response from the public, which is kind of probably interesting as well, mostly brainwashed and think that you're crazy, and then, of course, the response from the state itself.
Yeah. Well, you know, it's funny you talk about the reactions from people who have been conditioned. Just hold on a second. Sorry, I just need to plug something in. It's funny because just today I was out talking about a subject which is fairly a recent bugbear of mine, which is really, you know, probably one of the most provocative subjects that I could possibly choose. And I got attacked today, actually, by two people, which I very, very rarely do. Today I was sort of standing in the middle of central London and I was just suggesting that people should avoid making love tonight, because I was suggesting that the last thing we need is more people in the world like you guys, right? And I was kind of sort of jokingly, but half jokingly, suggesting that men who'd had vasectomies should be the most desirable for women to sleep with, because the last thing you want a guy to do is to leave you with a baby, because that's, you know, going to cause all sorts of serious problems. And there's a serious side to that, because I think that actually before a person has a child, I certainly think now, and I've already had 3 children, so it was too late for me to work this one out. But before a person has a child, I think they should be, firstly, definitely have plenty of money. They shouldn't have to have a job. They should be looking after the child, right? They should have definitely done some serious work on their childhood trauma and issues. They should definitely know what they should be eating. They should have a very good and healthy diet, because how can you bring a child into the world if you don't know what you should even be eating or what the child should be eating? And you should also have experience, probably of 2 or 3 months looking after somebody else's child, so that you know what it's like. So I'm saying this on a megaphone in the central London, and there's 50 people watching, and there's a lot of people getting really angry, because this kind of idea goes right against the grain of what we've all been taught and what society says about, you know, and people get pregnant and people say, oh, fantastic, wow, you got pregnant, well done, right? But I'm coming in there with a megaphone, and it's and it creates a lot of cognitive dissonance for people. It's just like, because, you know, I'm quite articulate and it's kind of making sense. It's a megaphone. You expect it to be about Jesus. It's not. And it's going against all your beliefs. So I had a woman there who was drunk, right? And she threw a whole glass of Coke on me, Coca-Cola that she'd been drinking, right? And then another guy came up to me and started hitting me with a newspaper. And people did come and sort of protect me, but it's because I think it's because of what they say about, you know, when you hear the truth, firstly it makes you angry and denial and all these sort of reactions. It is quite scary when you hear the truth coming from an unlikely source, which is a bloke on a megaphone. When I say the truth, you know, I'm kind of being a little bit broad with that. But when you hear something that rings true, and it's a guy on a megaphone, and it's it can be really frustrating, and it can make people angry. And so that's the experience I had today. Although I rarely get attacked, I very rarely get attacked. But that particular subject is a new one that is very sensitive, because people have got, this fatherly, motherly thing and children, and they're very, very protective about all that sort of idea. So that's one of the things I've been talking about recently. But I talk about all sorts of things in try and do it in funny ways. One of the things that Larkin taught me is this whole idea about the madness of government, of these laws that basically end up with the law enforcers being the criminals. So for one of the things is drug taking. I think this whole drugs war is just such a bogus, terrible, criminal thing going on with these governments. They are just criminalizing people for doing absolutely nothing. Right now, there are people in jail, thousands of them, are completely and utterly innocent, and they shouldn't be there. So so my reaction to it would be to start talking about it in public. So I might get up with a megaphone in the middle of a town and speak about magic mushrooms, or and then I'll get the police coming up to me, and then I'll question them. And it'd be a good opportunity for me to question them on camera. So I've got a film, for example, where I question a couple of police officers about why they think it's okay to steal, my personal desire to put something in my body. Why is it okay for you to steal it? So that's the kind of thing that happens, and the kind of reactions I get. And as I say, occasionally I get arrested. Very, very, very rarely, but occasionally I get arrested. And I then go through the whole court system, and that's a whole other story in itself, which is completely and utterly corrupt, and a money-making machine. That's again a whole discussion in and of itself.
Yeah, and I want to get into that discussion a little bit, but let's continue on a little bit with what you're saying. It's pretty funny that people are physically attacking you just for saying these things. And it just goes to show, because obviously if you don't have a very good argument and all you can do is throw things at someone, it really goes to show you don't have a very good argument. So it really shows that those people have some cognitive dissonance. And unfortunately, most people in the world today, especially in the West, where they've been so indoctrinated and so believe in this system, have just had all this wrong information put in their head since such a young age. And this is all on purpose. That's what the indoctrination systems are for. That when they hear something that kind of like, sounds kind of like something in their head goes, he's kind of right, they get really angry because they can't hold the two ideas at the same time. And of course, they can't really say anything because they're kind of dumbed down from being in those government schools their entire lives and watching their television programming and going to their footy games and whatever. They just don't even know how to debate or even think rationally anymore. So, yeah, it's really interesting that you put yourself out there, especially there in London. That seems to be one of the more police state places in the world. Of course, they've got so many cameras. I think there's I forget the stat. It's something crazy, like 10 cameras for every person or something. Like, it's literally everything is on camera there. I've heard all kinds of crazy stories about what they're doing with sort of free speech. Well, they don't have free speech, obviously, but what they're doing when people say things. Like, one guy I heard said something like, it was like nothing. I don't even remember what it was, but it was something so minor about a guy who was walking past and he was on camera, and the guy took him to court and said it was like a hate crime or something for calling him lazy old guy or something. That, like, it really wasn't much more than that. And they're really going after that in the courts there. So you're putting yourself right in the middle of it in this like very large police state where a lot of the brainwashed slaves are all believing in the system as well. And so let's talk a little bit about how you've been sort of attacked. So what have you actually been taken to court for? And give us some of those stories. Oh, well,
lots of very funny situations. One of them, I was outside McDonald's and I was talking about slavery. And on a rare occasion, I actually had a car there. And someone came past and got down the reg of my car, reported me to the police. It was a young black guy who'd admitted he'd been drinking, and he's with a friend who was hard of hearing, so he had hearing aids in. And he accused me of calling him a slave and saying, "You're a black slave, go and get me some McDonald's," right? And they took this all the way to court, right? All the way, they did a parade They did a parade with me, right? They put me in front of, with 5 guys, and they got this guy to pick me out, right? And then they called me in and they got me to court. And then, of course, eventually they dropped it. Because basically I think they're just sort of, some people who work in the police just find what I do annoying, or what they think is wrong. So every so often they have a little go at me. At the time, it feels very uncomfortable. But when I've got over it, it's an incredible experience. I'm very fortunate because I've never been convicted and I've never been locked up. But I've learned so much about the law, so much about how it all works in a way that very few people have. Certainly not lawyers. Lawyers don't know what it's like to be on the wrong side of the law. It's totally and utterly corrupt. It's completely bent, right? And they don't know it. They think it's perfectly reasonable what they're doing. And the reason why, of course, we know is because we've all been indoctrinated in the camps of the government to believe that this authoritarianism is perfectly normal and okay. For example, I've taught my children chose to go to school. I kind of often, when I drop my youngest one off, I say, "Are you sure you want to go?" Right? And I encourage them not to attend detentions. Like, what right has anybody got to detain somebody else because he didn't do what they told them to do? And this is all part of the conditioning in these schools to get young people to believe that they should do as they're told, and if someone wants to detain them, they can. So yeah, I've learnt a lot about it through going through the system, and try and teach my children as best I can, and they're turning out all right.
Yeah, it's interesting because I also tell my kids that they actually go to a Montessori school here in Acapulco, and I say often, I'm like, you don't have to go, and you definitely don't have to listen to them if they tell you stuff that you don't want to do. But the great thing about that is it is a private school, so it's so much better. It's like literally night and day. Plus, it's not in the U.S. or the UK, so it's quite nice actually. But yeah, so many people assume that that's where they should be sending their kids, and their kids should be listening. And as you pointed out about the court system, yeah, anyone who's actually ever dealt with the court system, you very quickly find out what it's all about. I think almost you said that the things that people should do before they should have a baby. It's like, if you're going to talk about laws and courts and stuff, you should have to go through it at least once and see what a complete and total absolute sham it is. And just the fact that people think that's what protects them is just absolutely hilarious. It's just a complete, it's just a money system. All the lawyers and judges, they all work together with the police to just make money, and they're all basically sold their souls for that. They're putting, as you said, just so many people into who have never hurt anyone into cages. It's absolutely unbelievable. So, yeah, it's interesting. It's great that you actually get out there and do it. As I mentioned, I used to speak out a little bit more in public, but now I don't, and I actually don't even do it online anymore. My life is so much more peaceful now. But I do remember one time that I was in the States somewhere, and I had been drinking a fair amount, and I started going off, and I said, "You're all a bunch of slaves." And as I turned around, as I was saying that, there was 5 black guys all standing there, and I was like, I hope they don't take this the wrong way. Like, not you, like everyone, we're all slaves. And they were too brainwashed or maybe drunk to understand what I was saying anyway. So I was lucky in that respect. So what are you up to now? I think when we were talking here in Acapulco, you said you had some great ideas for things that you're going to be working on. Why don't you give us a little bit about what's ahead for you this year?
Okay. I've actually got some questions for you, if I may. So my before I say what I'm up to, I've got questions for you about money, because it's something that I kind of struggle with a little bit, the whole idea of money. And here's my question for you, right? When money is brought into the picture, you could say that it creates a kind of division between people, because it's as if to say, when money comes into the picture, as if to say, hey, you're not my brother, you're not my sister, and therefore I can charge you money for it. So, for example, I've got 4 siblings and parents and children, right? And I don't charge any of them for anything that I do for them, right? So that's my question for you, is like, doesn't money corrupt things. As an anarchist that you are, and you I presume you're not, you wouldn't deny that you've done well out of it. What's your thoughts about the corrupting side of money? What's your thoughts about the exploitation that is so rife in our system, so that everything that we use. Look, this phone that I'm speaking into was made probably in horrible conditions, and the minerals were extracted in an awful way. And the clothes that I'm wearing, it's just the food, everything is like tainted with exploitation. How do you, as an anarchist, relate to money in the first place as a divider between man, and also the exploitation that is so rampant in society?
Well, that's a very interesting question, and something that would take quite a while to describe all my views, but I'll try to nail down a few of them right now. First of all, money itself, well, we have to understand that the money that we have today, that most people use, British pounds, US dollars, this is not actually real money. This is a fiat currency system backed by nothing, forced upon people through currency laws and through extortion, which they call taxation, and people actually have to make those units to pay for their extortion and things like that. So this really corrupts the whole system just from the get-go. Money itself is a good thing in general. Well, first of all, I'd say inanimate object, right? So it can't be good or evil. It's sort of like a gun. Is a gun good or evil? Well, it depends who's holding it, right? So money is very much like that. And money really is a way to transact and to exchange energy. Actually, it's actually exchanging your work and your energy with other people easily. For example, if you make and I grow apples, and we had no money, the only way that you could get my apples, you don't know me or anything, we're not like best friends or like brothers or anything. The only way that I would want to actually give you some apples is if I needed a bucket, right? So the barter system really makes everything much more difficult. Money's a good tool to use, just like anything else. And if it's not corrupted by the state, something like Bitcoin or something like that, it's very useful and valuable for many things. And really all transactions, the word capitalism, I saw you posted that you're talking to me about anarcho-capitalist and asked if anyone had any questions. The word anarchist has been really skewed. That word most people think means, a guy who riots and blows things up and stuff. Really what it means is self-ownership. I believe I own myself, and I don't believe I was born into a thing where I signed a social contract, which I didn't, and these guys now own me, and now they can extort me, and it's all fine. So I think you understand that is totally fine, so the anarcho part of it. So then there's the capitalist part. That word has also been totally skewed, and I don't mind if we stop using the word altogether because most people have no idea what it means anymore. But when I say capitalist, I mean like free markets. What I believe in is that we should all be allowed to trade with whoever we want. It's very simple. There's no government necessary and that sort of thing, and I think the world would be much more beautiful if we were allowed to do that. So really what I'm talking about with money is the ability for us to trade amongst each other very easily, not in a barter system. You can do barter if you want, but like I said, you're going to have a hard time really getting some of the things that you might want because for the reasons I pointed out. So money is very valuable in that terms for us all having a better life. It's an exchange of our energy. So for example, when we're working on whatever it is and we make some money, that actually is a form of our past work held in a sort of a physical or even non-physical in terms of Bitcoin in a form that we can then exchange with other people. So in a truly free world, in a true free market, whoever is the richest person would be looked upon as almost godlike. Wow, that person must have offered so many people so many valuable things that he became that wealthy. What we have today, when you look at wealthy people, who are all the wealthy people? It's all the politicians, the banksters, all the wrong people. They've never provided anything of value to anyone. In fact, all they've done is extorted and robbed and screwed people over their entire lives. So that's why a lot of people who, when they get kind of angry about capitalism, they look at that. It's like, well, I don't like that either. I absolutely hate it. That's what I do at the Dollar Vigilante. I say mankind's two biggest enemies are the government and the central banks, and the central banking system is what creates a lot of these problems. So then you bring up exploitation. you say, well, in my phone, I don't know, maybe some kids had to work to make this. Well, maybe the kids wanted to work to make that. I don't know personally. And in many ways, it's actually good. Where would kids actually be better off, actually? Would they be better off actually doing something that they want to do, productive, and actually making a little bit of money if they want to? Well, there definitely shouldn't be laws against that, right? Or should they be forced into these indoctrination camps and be basically enslaved their entire lives and not taught anything, in fact, taught all the opposite things that are actually real? So when you say exploiting people, be careful about that, because have you gone to China and talked to some of the people who helped make that phone? I'm pretty sure, I don't know because I haven't talked to them either, I'm pretty sure they haven't been forced into it. In fact, I have been in China and I've talked to many people who are working for a couple $100s a month, and they're so happy. They're like, this is beautiful. For the first time, our family in generations, we have like running water and we have like stuff that we really want and need because I have the ability to work now. Now, yeah, the conditions might not be that great, but look at New York 150 years ago, even 100 years ago. Just go back and look at the very start of the 20th century, pictures of New York. You'll see all these kids, they're all soot all over their face. They've been working all day. They're literally like 7 years old. But that's what kind of grew the U.S. as we know it today in general, is they were able to work and able to get things. And for example, if those kids are being really abused in their home, what happens today? Well, now you get Child Protective Services, comes over, steals the kid, even if they weren't being abused, throws them into pretty much a sex slavery system, and they're passed around to mostly rapists, or put into very, as you know, everything in government is corrupt, so they're thrown into that system. Or should the kids be able to go, hey, you know what, I'm going to go down to the street, I'm going to make some art and sell it and make some money, and I'm going to move out of my house if they want to, right? So I'd be a little careful about thinking about exploitation, because, and really, again, if you really believe that that phone really exploited someone and really hurt someone, then that's on you for buying it. You should not buy that phone if you believe that is the case. I don't personally believe that's the case, or I would not have bought it myself. If I knew for sure someone was being whipped and against their will to make my phone, there's no way I'd buy that phone. Absolutely not. So again, with the free market, you can make the decision with your own money. That's true democracy, actually. So if enough people knew that Apple iPhones are being made by slaves who are getting whipped every day, and they decided, you know what, that's not right, I'm not going to buy an iPhone, then Apple goes out of business. And then someone else starts up, and they're like very careful. It's like, let's make sure we're paying the employees something decent, or people won't buy our product. So in the free market, everything can kind of work itself out. But when you get government involved, and they're involved in everything today, and when the entire monetary system is totally corrupt and totally fake and a total Ponzi scheme, everything gets totally corrupted and people get confused. But really, at the end of the day, there's nothing better for humanity in general than to be free and to be able to freely interact and trade. And money could be a part of that. And really, money should be decided by the markets. What we have today is money is forced upon most people. Like I pointed out earlier, in a true free market, we don't know what money would be. I bet it'd be pretty close to something like Bitcoin right now, though, and it'd definitely be gold and silver and things like that. And that's what's happened in the past. The last 5,000 years, gold and silver were mostly used as money for that reason. But it was the market that decided. There's been almost everything's been used as money since as far back as we know. So I understand where your question's coming from. But I think if you understood a bit more about what I know, and comes from decades of reading everything on libertarianism, Austrian economics, understanding money, then you, I think, would be a lot more comfortable with these sort of things. But if you have a follow-up question to that, go ahead. I don't mind having this interviews go two-way.
Yeah, I do. I have a follow-up question. I have to admit that my knowledge of things like Austrian economics is very sketchy, and so I need to go back and look at that. And yet, I kind of the follow-up question is that there was a tiny little bit in what you just said right at the beginning, which I picked up on, in which you said, you know, if I have apples and you've got a bucket, and you don't know me, you're not my brother, right? So as far as I'm concerned, what I kind of my vision is that we evolve as beings into the realization that actually we are in a virtual reality, which Tom Campbell, by the way, if you haven't checked his work out, he's amazing on YouTube. We're in a virtual reality. We're part of a one consciousness. We are actually brothers and sisters, all of us. You know, God put all the apples out on the earth, and there's plenty of apples and oranges and all those things, and that the whole idea of ownership seems to me to be problematic. The idea of, someone saying, right, I've got all the apples. The way I see it at the moment, for example, which I think is absolutely crazy. And I've gone into supermarkets. I'll get a bag of apples, and I'll go by the counter, and I'll say, where did you get these apples from? Like, how come that Tesco, which is a British company, how come Tesco have got like hundreds of millions of apples that like the creator put there, God or nature, whatever you want to call it, the creator put there. So I struggle with the idea of ownership. I struggle with the idea because, and that's one of the things someone asked me to ask, because ownership seems to it seems to come hand in hand with violence. Because once you say, this is mine, and therefore I have a right to defend myself, which might mean attacking or killing you, where did you get all that stuff from? And I struggle with the idea of ownership.
Yeah, I understand that, and I kind of agree with you that if we did evolve to what this understanding, which actually I'm fairly close to that understanding myself. I've done so many things personally, meditation and psychedelics, and I really feel that yes, we are in probably some sort of virtual reality. You can even explain the Bible that way, by the way. Like who's the creator of the game? The actual 3D game creator. Well, the creator. Whatever you want to call it. Something created this, right? And we're all in it, and that's nothing's for sure, but that's what we think. And yeah, I actually have gone to the point where I'm like, yeah, we're all basically all connected and all that sort of thing. So I'm with you on that. The issue comes with, how do you change? First of all, we know just from you doing your man on the street interviews and from talking to people, 99% of people are not anywhere near close to that for whatever reasons. So that's not going to change overnight. So what is the best thing for us to do here? And of course, we can't force anyone to change, and we don't want to force anyone to change. So we can't force people to understand what we know. So given that, what is sort of the best way for humanity at the moment to get along so that we can get to a higher consciousness and end all the wars, end all the poverty, all this sort of stuff? That's to get rid of governments and central banks. Now, of course, we can't even do that until enough people wake up. So that's really a big part of what I'm trying to do is wake people up. But I lost my train of thought on property. Yes. So when you say ownership on property, would you agree that you own yourself, right? That's sort of like the basis of anarchist statement is self-ownership. That in general here, like maybe, there's God or whatever, but here, as far as we know, would you generally agree that you should own yourself, right? No one should own you, right? Okay. So if you own yourself, then you're doing stuff here, right? You're a physical being, you're doing stuff. And let's say you get a hammer and you got some nails and somehow, maybe you worked for them and you got them and you built yourself a little house in the woods. Now, if I come along and go, hey, that's not really yours, you're not going to feel too good about that, right? You spent like a year building that house because you wanted that house and you wanted, for whatever reason, you just wanted a nice place that you could have in the forest. So when you talk about ownership, how would you feel if I came along and said, well, we're all one, I'm going to stay in there? Doesn't feel good, right? I think we should own the fruits of our labor. If we work on things, and again, this whole system has corrupted everything so much that all the bad people own all the stuff. So this is really hard for people to understand. But I think your average person, even a little kid, knows when you take away his toy, he's not happy because that was his, right? He had that, and you took it away. That's not good. Even a child kind of understands that. Now, of course, we can get to some higher level consciousness, but that's not going to happen right away. I can't see any signs of that happening right away. In the meantime, we should just try to get rid of all the things that are really screwing everyone up and get back to they own themselves and that they can use whatever money that they want at this moment in time. All of the issues that a lot of people have, and these are mostly what you would call communists, some of them call themselves anarcho-communists, that there should be no such thing as private property. I've never met anyone to really explain that to me well and properly. For example, I've met a few people who have said that to me, and as they're talking, I grab their usually it's a really nice MacBook Pro. I don't know where they got it since they don't believe in private property. And I just start walking off and they just lose their crap. And they're like, what are you doing? And I'm like, you just said that there's no such thing as private property. It's like, well, you felt that was yours, didn't you? And I felt it was yours as well. But if you're going to make the point that it's not yours, that it's everybody's. And we've seen in this reality with the current state of human consciousness the results of very communist type systems. And they've been tried. And most of the information we're given is incorrect about everything. But I've been to places like Cuba and Venezuela where they've kind of tried to do more communist stuff. And I know many people lived in the Soviet Union and they're like, it was not good at all when you try to say that no one owns anything. Because when you own something, you also take care of it. You also protect it. And this is sort of another issue as well. When you talk about the environment and things like that, if there was private ownership of even the seas and the rivers, if you could actually buy a part of the river, you'd take really good care of it probably. And if you didn't, you'd then have to deal with the people downstream and they'd have issues with you, whatever. But I think it's actually better when everyone owns everything, because what happens when you own something? You take care of it, right? And when you're given something for free... just let me just finish one sentence. When you give them something for free, you don't really appreciate it. That's why the whole welfare system really destroys people, because they didn't really actually earn it. It was stolen from someone and given to them. And you look at most people on welfare, and they're just so unhappy. Whereas if they had just spent some time and worked and put some effort into something and built something themselves, and I've met so many people who've done this, right? You know, they've worked themselves out of quite a lot of poverty, and they made a little life for themselves. They feel so good, right? So. You know, what are your solutions if you want to get rid of private property ownership, right? You're going to have to come to my house and start taking my stuff, and I'm going to tell you right now, you're going to get shot. So what are the solutions there?
I don't know. As I say, for me, I think for me, on my Steemit account, which I'd like to speak about in a minute, I've got question everything. So for me, I'm basically sort of more of a questioner, and I suppose I have some serious questions, and I understand what you're saying clearly. I hear what you're saying, and you know, I've got a lot of stuff, and how much I don't believe in property, I would probably get a bit pissed off if you nicked my MacBook Pro, right? So yeah, I hear that. And at the same time, I look around me, and you say about if we own rivers, but I look around me, and I think one of the I don't know. I think one of the huge problems is not just governments and central banks; it's also corporations. The idea of a corporation, which is an idea, right? I don't know if you've seen the film The Corporation. Have you seen it?
The McDonald's one?
It's a film called The Corporation. It's about corporations. It's a great film. You should watch it. Basically, you know, corporations are if corporations were humans, they would be psychopaths. If you look at the characteristics of a psychopath, and then you take any corporation, they're all of them. They would be psychopaths. They would be locked away. Starbucks and Tesco and all of them. They'd all be locked away, right? If they were human beings. And I suppose that's also another concern of mine, a question that I have for you about corporations, that they're these structures that allow people to have no responsibility for anything that they do. So I'm assuming that you would say that sort of thing is not compatible. That was created by governments to get to. I don't know. What would you say about corporations and the problems of corporations?
Yeah, you're right. That is not a free market thing. Corporations are just another thing just destroyed and created by governments. In a free market, there'd be no such thing as a corporation. First of all, who would you even apply to get corporation status from? And then secondly, if you said, oh, we don't want to be held responsible for anything we do, the market would be like, you're talking crazy here. Of course, you're responsible for everything you do. So yeah, these are all created by government and again, central banks and this whole system. And it's got everyone so confused. Like, why is all these problems? It's all created by that. In a free market, you'd have probably some larger businesses. I don't think they would ever get really to that size that corporations do, because it'd be. But that is a good question, though. I don't know exactly what would happen in a true free market, how that would evolve with businesses. businesses? That is a good question. I'm going to give you one little small book to read that I think will give you some really good insights into a lot of stuff. It takes, for everyone out there, it takes maybe an hour or two to read. It's almost like a pamphlet. It's called The Market for Liberty, and you can even find it for free online in a PDF format at the Mises Institute. If you want, you can also pay for it if you want to support the authors at Kindle on Amazon, or just buy I think they're still in book format as well. I would suggest you read that and take a look. And I totally agree with you. Yes, there's really not much difference between corporations and government at this point. It's become a very fascist. It's almost the same thing. They work together. Google, for example, is like so far from like a private company that you can barely even call it a private company anymore, and that sort of thing. So yeah, absolutely. Corporations, for the most part, do a lot of really bad things, and they shouldn't be able to. The only reason they can is because of governments. In a free market, that would be a lot different. We don't necessarily know exactly how it would develop. That's the great thing about the free market. You never know how the market's going to do if it's allowed to function, but it would be interesting. And I hear you on that issue, and this is an issue that I hear from a lot of people, a lot of smart people, that they kind of worry that if we have like no government and no central banks, then the corporations are going to take over. But again, can't really have the corporations without the government's central banks. So this gets into some sort of fairly interesting topics of conversation. And I have to mention, I do have to go in about 5 minutes. I do have something else to do soon. So I know you also want to talk about Steemit, which I also love. So if you have any retort that you can do in a minute or two, go ahead. And if not, just go ahead with anything on Steemit.
I'm going to ask you a really direct question, right?
All right.
I like to... I actually asked Dan this question, Dan Larimer, because Dan Larimer has been cashing out his millions of Steem, right? And I said to him, he wrote that the reason why he created Steemit was, one of the reasons was to make governments irrelevant, which I thought was great, right? And my appeal to him and to you is to invest in Steemit yourself, yeah? And if you were to buy like 1 million Steem and then delegate it and to either some people or someone, so that people like myself and all the people that came to Anarchapulco can like get by until something better comes along, is that something you consider doing? Because I think that Steemit is for anybody watching here who's an investor. I think Steemit is. As much as I have huge problems with Ned, the marketing is pathetic, the user experience is really not good enough. It takes ages to get an account, all that stuff, right? I know about, right? And I can complain about that, but it's not going to help anything. And having said all that, at the moment, it's the only kind of thing out there that's actually working. And I think it's a really interesting opportunity for people like yourself that are investors that have money to be able to kind of create, to have an investment. Yes, it's a risky investment. It could go to zero, right? But to have an investment that can actually be used in a philanthropic way, it's a very, very unusual investment. And I just wanted to put that to you to help us out there, to help all the anarchists who are on this who are on Steem at the moment, the platform. There are like probably thousands of really great people on there, and there are thousands more who probably should be on there, like Dana Martin, who I did a little interview with. Is that something that you think is something you'd consider?
Well, you say philanthropic. I actually believe that charity as a whole actually isn't all that great. In fact, I think building businesses that can continue to employ people and create wealth for people is one of the best things you can be doing with capital. So if you're saying, why don't you throw most of your money into Steem, just even if you think you're going to lose it all, just to help out a bunch of people? It's like, well, no, because I'd be destroying capital, so that wouldn't actually be good for anyone. However, here's my thoughts on Steem. I actually just turned bullish again for the first time in the last few weeks. I was bullish on it when it was around 40 cents because I thought it was too big before. When it was last summer, when it was around I forget the market cap. It was like 100 or 200 million, or no, I forget what the market cap was, but it was too high for where it was at the time. So I was like, don't buy it here. It went down to about 10 cents, and I started to say, start buying at around 20, 30 cents. A lot of people have done very well on that. It's currently around $3. It went up to about 6 or 7 recently. pulled back, and I actually just, in our newsletter, just said, I think it might be time to start buying Steem again, not for philanthropic reasons, but because it actually could do well, and if it does do well, that's great for everyone, right? The reason for that is because of all the censorship going on with YouTube. We saw this week InfoWars get turned off for a while, and Health Ranger, numerous, I'm sure you know of many that get just turned off all the time. If they all start moving to what is called DTube, and if you haven't heard of DTube, it's based on the Steem blockchain, and it's basically a version of YouTube, but it's sort of based on a blockchain, so you can't really censor it anywhere near as much. So yes, if you can actually look up all my transactions on Steem. That's one of the beautiful things about Steem that's interesting. If you go to Dollar Vigilante, you will see that I powered up most of my Steem a few weeks ago instead of taking it out and selling it. And by powering it up, you're basically locking it up for a period of time, which that in itself helps the price of Steem. As far as philanthropic, one of the great things about Steem is that I can help promote and get more people, more Steem by letting people know, because I have one of the largest audiences on there. I have over 20,000 people following me. So if I like one of your posts or upvote it or re-steam it, you will get a lot more Steem. And that's what I've been doing. I've been trying to help out the people that I know who are doing good work that way. Every day I try to re-steam or upvote numerous people. I do it with Larkin quite a bit because I know he doesn't have a lot of money. He puts out a lot of good content. So that's ways that I'm doing that, absolutely. And again, that's the beauty of the free market, right? Like I want to do that because I also might profit from it as well. And there's nothing wrong with profit. In fact, in a free market, every single transaction is profitable for both sides. If you needed apples and I needed a bucket, we both profited from that transaction, and it's beautiful. And that's the beauty of the free market, and that's what we're seeing with Steem. And you're right, Dan Larimer is a hardcore anarchist, anarcho-capitalist who everything he designs is meant to make government and central banks obsolete, which is beautiful. And that's also why I'm a big supporter of his project EOS. I have 2 minutes till I have to do another call. So Danny, feel free, promote everything you want, anything you want, your YouTube channel, your Steemit, and let us know any final thoughts in 2 minutes or less.
Okay, so yes, just YouTube is Social Experimentalist. I'm going on a tour of the UK over the next few months, which I'm going to put on Facebook. I'm Danny Shine on Facebook, also at Danny Shine on Steemit. I just wanted to say one other thing that I forgot to say earlier on. Doing what I do is so exciting and so much fun, and if you're able to join me in physical person when I'm there, it's really, really very enriching. You get to see people's reactions. It's astonishing. People's reactions are just so funny and interesting. So I'd just like to invite as many people as possible to come out with me on my travels as I go around touring the country. And it's been really good speaking to you, Jeff. And hopefully I will see you next year at Anarchapulco. I'd love to speak there. If not, beforehand. So thanks a lot for having me on your show.
Yeah, absolutely. Put in the comments below if you'd like to see Danny speak at Anarchapulco. We haven't even started to put together the speakers list yet, so you're definitely on the potential speakers list. Also, is there a place that you announce where you're going to be? So if people out there in the UK want to come out and see what you're doing, or even be just around, it might be kind of helpful if you're getting attacked a lot. Do you announce that anywhere?
I do on Facebook at the moment, and I do use Facebook for that. Right, I don't really use Facebook for very much else, but I do announce it on Facebook. I'm going to make a little thing on YouTube as well, and I also put it on Steemit. So it's all
great. So we'll have the links to all that down below. Make sure you friend or follow Danny on Facebook. Make sure you follow him on Steemit. Upvote some of his posts if you think they're good and you want to help him to continue to be able to do what he's doing. And that's the beauty, like I said, of the free market. That's how you vote with your dollars, or with your Steem in this case. I have to run. I actually have a very important phone call with who might be some of the top keynote speakers for 2019. Very big people in about 2 minutes, so I do have to run. Really appreciate having you on, Danny. And if you like this video, please like, subscribe, share down below. And that's it for Anarchast, your home for anarchy on the internet. Peace, love, and anarchy.
From Acapulco, Mexico, this is Anarchast.